Good evening. I'd like to call the Board of Finance Budget Workshop meeting for Thursday, March 5th, 2020 to order. We are going to have 3 items on the agenda tonight. We are going to have public forum at the beginning of the meeting, public forum at the conclusion of the meeting, and during the middle, we will consider and take possible action on the proposed fiscal year 2020-21 budget. Before we get started, first, public forum. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Okay. Item number 2, consider and take possible action on proposed fiscal year 2021 budget.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a little bit. You and I talked earlier, late this afternoon, early evening. There was some very good news that we got earlier today.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
I'm letting you know before Mike does.
Thank you for allowing me to speak in my ex officio capacity.
You're very welcome.
Earlier today, we received some very good news related to a Board of Assessment Appeals that had gone to trial. We received word that we won the case in court. This was a substantial case. We had valued the property at $3.5 million. The plaintiff had come in at 1.8. The judge ruled in our favor and ruled it at 3.5. As you're aware, we take an offset against the grand list for open appeal cases like this. So we had written down the grand list in anticipation that we might lose this case. So this afternoon, Mary Jane was able to update the grand list, so the grand list grew by a little bit, and the net effect as it relates to tax increase, and I've got some copies here. I think we were able to get it uploaded to board pack around 5 o'clock tonight, so it should be there. But the net effect is the tax increase goes from the anticipated 1.62% to 1.57%, and I've got copies of these which I'll pass out to you, so I thought you might want that before your deliberations began.
Thank you very much appreciated, and it is good news. Which of course changes the numbers that I wrote down last night in preparation for this meeting, which is perfectly fine. I just have to cross out a couple things here. Thank you. As that's being handed out, I'll just quickly do an outline of tonight. I'm going to do a quick recap of where we left off on Tuesday evening before we adjourned. Then we will go to questions of the town budget by the Board of Finance, and I'm sure the questions will be answered and represented by First Selectman Hoey. Questions of the Board of Education budget by the Board of Finance will be probably, I'm assuming, yes, fielded by Dr. Balistraci and Dr. Freeman. And then we will go into our discussion, deliberation, and consideration of the budgets that have been presented and most likely move forward a final budget to town meeting on April 7th. Before we go into deliberations and discussion, just a recap for those that were not at Tuesday's meeting or were not able, well, I don't think the Tuesday's tape has been on GCTV yet, but those who haven't seen it on YouTube, because I'm sure it's already posted there. The town operating budget, there's been a request of $31,569,607, and that is an increase of 3.40%. On the town debt service request, that is an amount of $10,495,185. That is a 10.29% increase. On the Board of Education operating budget, the Board of Education has requested $61,778,459. That's a 2.03% increase. And all of those budgets added together is a I'm not going to read the 100 and let me just make sure, $103,843,251. That's a 3.22% increase. On the revenue side, There is a projected non-tax revenue increase of $510,541, with those gains largely in interest income, building permits. There is no teacher pension contribution as we thought there would be last year, so that's back in the revenue, and a $95,000 decrease in the educational cost sharing grant from the state. Also factoring into this is the grand list increase, which has, as of, well, let's just put it this way, about 3 hours ago was 1.18%. I'm not sure what it is exactly now, but I know it just went up. And so therefore, the mill rate projected tax increase, based on these factors I've just mentioned, would be 32.53, which would now equal a 1.57% increase from the current 32.03. Just quickly, the bonding question that's been requested by the Board of Education is $2,615,960. That includes HVAC projects, and that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning projects at Baldwin and Lakes, window door upgrades at Lakes, and associated design fees for future projects. And that is the recap, as briefly as I could do it, so that everyone knows what's in the numbers and where we stand. With that, to follow the order that we did the other night in the presentations, I will ask the Board of Finance if they have any questions directly regarding the town budget for Selectman Hoey and the Board of Selectmen. Anybody would like to start with that, or?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Veronica.
On the Park and Rec capital line item, there was, the Adams tennis courts were in the 2022 capital plan and then got moved to this budget. I was wondering, is there an issue there that suddenly caused it to be moved?
One of the things that's going to happen is we decided to move it because of the nature and the need for the work. But secondly, they are going to be installing pickleball courts, 2 pickleball courts, and they're utilized, and we wanted to schedule those at the same time while we have a contractor there.
While we're on athletic, this is a question I know has come up in the community, and I figured it might as well just address it now. For a while in the Capitol, and we know about this, about the turf field, the stadium turf field itself, not the new one that was part of the Guilford High School project that is now fully functioning, but the one that needs to be replaced that is now at 12 years, 13 years, yeah. I think we all noticed that has now come out of the capital budget, and there's been some concerns, at least it came to me from the community, regarding where that went and the safety of that field. I tried to answer it the best I could, which is, well, we're very aware of it and it needs to be replaced. It really needs to go into probably a bonding question, but I don't know if you want to address that a little bit more on the town side.
It came off of that in error because there were some discussions around which organization was going to be responsible for that, because it is now more than just replacing the stadium field. The project has grown to replace the track around it, which is traditionally the purview of the Board of Education. So the Standing Fields Committee, myself, a couple of members of the Standing Fields Committee, myself and Cliff Gurnham, met in, I think, late December on this. We are going out for bids for engineering services for design, and there was some hope that we were going to be able to continue to use KVA based on the work that they did for us on the new field. However, we are going to have to go out to bid for it. So it is now back on the 5-year capital plan. Okay. I don't know if it's been updated in board pack yet or not, but it hasn't. But it is back on there. So this project is in the works, and we apologize for the misleading nature of its disappearance from the 5-year capital plan.
Well, the community noticed. So.
Now, one thing
it's good to know that they're actually reading it. So.
One thing you should note, though, is This capital plan is the town's capital plan, 5-year capital plan. It does not include projects from the Board of Education. So we
Which
put
is
it,
part of the uncertainty. If Park and Rec
Right.
had that in their budget when they were funding a portion of
Just the
that.
field.
And I think the confusion about who was going to be handling the
You got it, you
funding
got
is
it.
why
No one's got it.
Park and Rec
Okay.
kind of removed it from their budget.
Okay.
And we have since put it back in since it's
This
come
is
to our attention.
Great, just as long as it's addressed, so, I know that came up, so.
Are there any other changes anticipated in the 5-year capital plan for the town?
not at this point. There will be as, as time goes on.
Right.
Dr. Freeman, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just that both surfaces are aging, the field and the track, but we do believe they both have at least one more year of viable life in them. So we should anticipate seeing a joint proposal from the schools and the town to replace both of them in the very near future.
Great. Thank you. Other questions for the town?
I have a question.
Meg?
So one of the driving factors for this budget was mentioned the SAFER grant, and we have 35% reimbursement for the next 9 months, right?
Correct.
Have you guys started talking about how we absorb that into, I know we're on this budget, but I'm sort of thinking, how are we gonna plan to absorb that going forward?
The same way we've absorbed it. Going from 70 to 35 in the current budget that we're operating in, and the way we're asking you to do it the following year. Now, as you may recall, when we added these firefighters, there was a significant discussion around evaluating at the close of the SAFER grant and the end of the grant funding, that we were going to reevaluate the need and the efficacy of the additional staff. I think in the presentation that I showed you the other night, there is strong evidence to suggest that there is tremendous community benefit in terms of dramatically reduced response times for a significant portion of our community. That doesn't mean, however, that we won't take a look at overall staffing patterns. We had to maintain a complement of 10 during the period that the SAFER grant was in effect. I can tell you that Mike Shove is as good as it gets in working with data, and he and I have already had several discussions about how we analyze and look at data.
May I add to that? If you look at the replacement salaries in the fire department line is where you see how we are absorbing that cost. In 17-18, it was $1,022,000. In 18-19, down to $992,000. In the current year, we have $757,000, and in the upcoming year, it's gone up a little bit to $792,000. But the difference between the $1 million down to the $792,000 is a way for us to absorb that cost. Am I correct, guys, in the back?
Great.
Jeff, go ahead.
One of the drivers of the increase in salaries is reserve funding for the ongoing negotiations. Any idea, without getting into the details, I know you can't, but how far along are we, and do you expect those to be prolonged or?
We are actively involved with all the unions at this point. We've got ground rules established for, I think, 3 or 4 of them.
Ground rules are established for the supervisors, ground rules established for the GEA. We've met with the police one time, we're meeting again next week with the police, and we have a meeting set up with the fire. We have not yet heard from the Teamsters. Those are the 5 contracts. So we're really in the beginning stages, quite frankly.
Okay.
Right,
And 5 is an unusually large number of bargaining.
It is, Jeff, and what happened was, through the way the contracts ended last time, we had some 3-year contracts, a 4-year contract, a 5-year contract, and it just
They all ended
coincided
at the same time, right?
But we're looking at staggering them. We're already talking about different lengths for some of the contracts already, so we don't expect this to repeat itself in 3 years or 4 years.
Great.
And it's already a matter of public record, because I believe it was discussed at the Fire Commission meeting on Monday night, or Tuesday night, that there is consideration for extending the firefighter contract by 1 year, which would help us get off that cycle.
Thank you.
A question, I guess maybe more for Mary Jane on this one. On the interest income, we had budgeted $100,000 more. Now we're projecting, we went from 425 for a budget this year, projected 575 this current cycle. We budgeted $100,000 more to 525. With the recent issues with the rates and the rate drop, do you see any substantial impact on the revenue, that line item?
Because I didn't budget for what we actually are anticipating in the current year, I kind of made an adjustment already for that fluctuation. Can I sit here today and tell you exactly
Of
what
course.
that's going to be? No.
No crystal ball?
But, you
Understood.
know, I think it's a fair number at this point.
Okay.
I think I mentioned the other night that the volatility in that is going to be impossible to predict. Bob, you
That's always
commented
good.
on
Ms.
that.
Smiley, I contacted our financial advisors day before yesterday to see what the recent move in rates is going to do. As you know, the Board of Selectmen has already approved a refinancing of a quarter of our bonds. This year will save us either side of $80,000 now, and next year $200,000 or more. So there's your offset.
You're right.
You know, what we lose on interest and cash, we're going to more than make up for in debt service.
Well said.
I think I have one other question, and then I'm just taking up the floor right now, but you had
You're entitled.
mentioned, Matt, regarding the departmental operational expenditures, that there was a decrease in 0.21%. Just, was that including the capital? Because I remember it said salaries, so the capital was not part of that.
Good guy.
Not, okay.
Yeah.
Departmental operating.
Operating.
Departmental operating expenses.
Operating
Not
minus
the capital.
salaries.
Minus the salaries, that's right.
Just wanted to
Yeah.
be clear on that.
Can you tell us where we are with the, or when to expect the facilities task force, and the safe streets, whatever we're calling it?
I'll start with Safe Streets. Safe Streets presented us with a resolution, but the Board of Selectmen with a proposed resolution that we adopt, which codifies their objectives, their policies, and how they anticipate interacting with the various departments. So that is moving forward.
But are there recommendations in there in terms
No,
of?
there are no recommendations yet.
So there's
on-
nothing to
on the safe-
implicate
on
on
the
our
Safe
capital
Streets.
plan or
Right.
anything coming down the road
Not
in
on
the
Safe
future?
Streets. Remember, they have you were gracious enough to approve $350,000 allocation on their behalf for demonstration projects, et cetera. So there are no immediate requests for any of those funds, although at their most recent meeting, they are starting to talk about bringing in some facilitators or some folks, some consultants who have done Safe Streets planning in the past. So the answer is no. And the other was on the
facilities.
Facilities
Facilities,
Task
when do you
Force.
expect
We have had some preliminary conversations with the chair and vice chair of the Facilities Task Force. Gary McKelney had anticipated getting us a first cut recommendation by sometime in March. So he has, I don't know whether the board has approved it yet. They had an outline of the recommendations. I asked Gary to put a little more flesh on some of the recommendations. So that process is underway, with the exception of the fact that I believe Gary's on vacation for a couple weeks.
Yeah, Ronnie, I think the difference between the two committees is that Safe Streets is more an advisory on how we plan for future projects, right? That's what that.
Right,
Helping us, look at some different ways of looking at projects as opposed to coming up with their own projects. That's what they provided the other day.
Their charge will include recommendations on where we should make improvements as it relates to sidewalks, walking paths, safety at work, pedestrian crossings, a whole host of things. So I don't mean to correct you.
No, that's okay, I didn't get that from you.
That's where I was going, was
Right.
whether or not any of those things were coming at us, if not this year, next year, or down the road.
There will be some things.
Yeah.
Further questions regarding the town budget?
Just with regard to the increase in the number of employees, it's a half a full-time employee. That's Park and Rec, and largely based in response to the increased, I don't want to say increased demand, but the constant demand for services. I mean, there's a wide variety of citizens who avail themselves of the services of Park and Rec.
Right, that and the fact that we only have a part-time receptionist at the front, at the front window. And so between, the demand or the ability for other people to fill in to do the receptionist role when that receptionist isn't there, is what is leading us to add that half.
It's pulling them away from the jobs that they would otherwise be doing.
Otherwise,
Right.
It's a population that likes to call. They
not
like
as,
that.
not as much online.
Not as
They
much
like,
online.
they like that one-on-one.
Right.
Well, we
Right.
address that. We're an aging population,
Yes.
and we're seeing it in various areas, not just in the schools, but
And-
the impacts on this building.
And I'll give you an example. I believe it was yesterday morning, after we had the Human Services Council meeting here. As I was walking out, there were 5 or 6 folks, they look like seniors, I won't say they were, who
We're all starting to look like
all were
seniors.
standing in line with forms. They were all standing in lines with forms and credit cards to sign up for the programs. So, they're not taking advantage of the ability to sign up.
And there is a fair amount of walk-up traffic at that desk. I mean, aside from the phone calls.
Rick's here, he could probably talk to that a little bit better.
I think my staff keep track for 1 week, and it wasn't a busy week, and then I counted there were 204 people, and over 750 phone calls in and out, and it was a relatively quiet week.
Yeah.
We had, there was a SIL program right here 2 days ago with the Coast Guard harpist and a flautist, and there were 120 seniors here for that, and many of them come to the front desk for one reason or another, and where they call and ask, well, when is the concert? What time is it? They all had to sign up for it. So there was 120 registrations for that one program. The senior population, Matt touched on it. We saw in a New Haven, I think it was New Haven Magazine, that said that the senior population in Guilford was going to grow 65% from 2015, I think it was, to 2025, and we're seeing it.
Maybe that's a program we can offer the seniors, is how,
Offer them a program on how to get younger.
yes, no, not on that, but how to enroll on the programs online.
We, since Rick spoke, I'd like to direct, one of the long memos we got, that I think it was earlier today, was a request for more transparency in the operating budget of the Park and Rec Department. Did you see that?
No.
Well, they were saying that there's a lot that, I don't know what the letter writer meant, but that there was a lot of operation, of the operation, that is not transparent. They don't see where all the fees are coming from, where they're going.
I'm not sure you can find out where the fees are coming from the golf course or any other than the beach passes. I also received a copy
You
of that,
received
and
that.
I responded to that individual and invited that individual to come in and sit down and talk about those issues that were raised. And I, for one, don't necessarily agree that we are not transparent. We have
Right.
never denied anyone information relative to any fee, expenditure, et cetera. So if it's not readily available because individual transactions or by program are not listed on a website somewhere, okay, then we are not transparent. But I don't lend as much credibility as you may have to that accusation, that we are not transparent.
It was just a shopping list of
It was
areas.
It absolutely was.
And I was wondering whether it might be appropriate for us to get some response to that.
Well,
You're
so
getting
two,
it. You're getting it right now.
yeah, so two things to that. We did, the board did receive two emails today. One, I don't know when the first one that we're referring to was, but it was a very long email. And I'm sure some of us, if not most of us, did not get a chance to digest that email. It was literally, it was literally going to be a 10-minute read at least. There was another email that came in from another community member that came in, I believe, just before 6. And when that came in, our first selectman responded to both of those and copied all of us in. So there is a response that's gone out to both of those individuals. And I do want to thank them for, they were very passionate in their emails and what they had to say, and very appreciative. So I'm sure any issues, I mean, especially that first one, we could certainly send it, the portion of it to Rick and make sure that, but I think our first selectman could probably handle that, and any questions could go over to Rick Maynard. But I thank you for addressing those as quickly as you did, because I know I couldn't.
I think a lot of the issues that were addressed are also available in CAFR, and that's available online, and the individual could find a breakdown on those revenue line items that they were talking about.
Yep.
Right there. So it's audited. I mean, it's.
Rather than write a tome in response, my intention is to sit down with the individual and walk through point by point the issues that were raised, issues or concerns that were raised. We should also point out that there was positive feedback in that email as well. So.
Further questions? Shall we move on? Okay, the doctors are up. Board of Education. Questions for Board of Education for Dr. Balistraci, Dr. Freeman. There was one question I had specifically. We've addressed it a couple of times when we talk about tuition. I think it would be worth the effort to have a small discussion or a history lesson on the challenges that have happened in tuition in the last 24 hours, not 24 hours, 12 months. Because we have seen huge fluctuations in that line item, and I think it goes to the point of trying to predict this line, and the fact that the Board of Education started out, I believe, with a, correct me if I'm wrong, was it a $150,000 increase in the tuition line item, and it went to 400? Or was it 250 to 400?
It's
250 to 400.
It's over.
Regardless, it's a $400,000 increase in tuition. And I think anybody who's looking at that who's not necessarily paying attention will be like, well, why is that? Well, if you look at the cycles, and you showed your great favorite slide, although you have a new your second favorite now, I just thought maybe we could talk about that, where we were literally 12 months ago. Because that is the most volatile line item.
It is the most volatile line item that we have, and the reason for that is really simply that it is such a small N of students that we're talking about, but that it can have such an inflated cost associated with it. We mentioned on Tuesday evening that the town, the local school district, is responsible for all special education costs up to 4.5 times of our regular per student expenditures. So, a regular per student expenditure that is now approaching $18,000 for one student who requires outplaced tuition, we could be responsible for the first $80,000 of that need. Remember, once we hit that point, the state is expected to come in with excess cost offsets, and the state has never met the 100% threshold. We anticipate that we get about 70%. So we pay 100% of the costs up to roughly $80,000, and we continue to pay 30% of any costs that exceed $80,000. So even though it's a very small number of students that we budget for annually, we always budget for the real students that we have in the system and their actual placements and their actual costs. We have year over year attempted to determine what is the appropriate contingency to build into that line when even a change in need of 2 or 3 or 4 students could end up throwing that line dramatically into shortfall. This time last year, as we stood in front of you preparing for this year's budget, we were more than $500,000 in deficit in last year's budget on that line item. This year, after budgeting and making some corrections moving forward, we're still in deficit. We're currently projecting to be about $150,000 in deficit as we move forward. Part of that deficit is because the new students who moved into the district that we had not budgeted for this year, they are currently in our projection that we bring forward next year, which is part of that $400,000 increase. And what we are trying to do is combine a budgeting strategy that budgets for the real students and the needs that we know they will have next year, and then creates a contingency that is based on that historical shortfall that we have been seeing. So we do expect that the increase that you see in front of you this year, which is in part real cost for the students moving forward, and in part a growing contingency based on the historical shortfall over the last 9 years, that we're going to be closing that gap. But again, I can only say that these will continue to be really fluid numbers. A few students who have needs that emerge that we had not anticipated for, and a few students who move into town as families come into our community, it could still have significant costs. Any one student could come in costing $100,000. You have 5 students come in or have needs that weren't previously identified, and that line will be in shortfall again next year. I can only remind you that with all that fluctuation, we have always managed to absorb those costs within the Board of Education's budget and have never come before this body requesting a special appropriation.
And if I may just add to that as well, absolutely right, we've never come back. Not this year, but last year, because of what we saw as expected overages as early as October, Dr. Freeman was freezing parts of the rest of the budget in October of an academic year. So, so again, we have always managed to make it to June 30th, but the board this year, when Dr. Freeman brought his proposed budget to us, one of the things we did was add a little to this tuition line, and we did it not because, and Linda and her team have not done well in kind of trying to project actual numbers, but we're feeling like we need that contingency. We've been short $500,000 to $600,000 for 5 or 6 years in a row, and need to try to get a handle on that line.
If I could just follow, when a freeze gets implemented, what does that mean for the rest of the students and the faculty?
The first places that we freeze are going to be in the site improvement lines, the supplies, the materials, and the equipment lines. So we do not freeze, we don't freeze substitutes, we don't freeze positions unless we get into an absolutely catastrophic situation with the budget. But it does mean that classroom supplies and materials will be curtailed. It does mean that the site improvement work will be curtailed. So standard maintenance, preventative maintenance, upkeep, replacement of carpet tiles and ceiling tiles, those are the things that get frozen every year. So it is the principal's discretionary funds, and it is to a large degree Mr. Gurnham's preventative maintenance and upkeep fund that will be frozen first. Again, the principals have done a fantastic job managing that. This year, we are projecting a much smaller shortfall, and we're happy to say that we have not frozen spending this year in any of those categories. We have, over the past several years, implemented gradual release of those funds. Principals only receive access to 50% of their budget in September. They get the second 50% released as we come back from the winter break, because principals are smart and they realized if they spent everything up front, that we can't freeze what we don't have. So while we did manage that gradual release this year, we haven't frozen any of those funds, and principals and Mr. Gurnham currently have access to all of their budgeted monies in this calendar year.
And also, when you talk about the town being responsible up to 4.5% of the average cost per pupil, that doesn't mean that once we hit that threshold, we tell the school, send a portion of your bill to the state. We write the check
Yes.
to the school, and then we apply to the state to get reimbursed.
Yes.
Right?
And we know that we will only receive in the ballpark of 70% of those accrued costs in that reimbursement. That's correct.
Right.
Is that number going to be changing any for this coming year, or do you still look for no more than 30% relief if you hit these catastrophic areas?
It's hard to tell. The state releases the funds in a staggered way as well. We received the first allocation of those funds from the state in February, and it was slightly above 70%. I believe it was in the ballpark of 73 or 72 or 73%. They hold monies back because, like us, they don't know what needs will be identified in the back half of the year. So when we receive the rest of that allocation in June, I expect that it'll trend down from the 72 or 73. We anticipate it's going to be right around the 70% again. The state sets aside a fund in their budgeting, and then all of the communities, all 169 towns, draw from that fund based on their actual experienced need. And so it fluctuates each year based on what everybody's actually experiencing in the local school districts here in Guilford and around the state. 70 is usually a pretty accurate prediction. It's been lower and it's been higher, but it tends to average around 70.
On your reductions in workforce, if we don't see the attrition, have we allocated additional funds in the unemployment compensation line to address?
I don't think that we necessarily increased the number, but we do believe that what we have budgeted is going to be appropriate. We're beginning to see some retirements coming in so that we know that some of those reductions are being offset by retirement. Additionally, I failed to mention Tuesday, but the coaching positions that we have built into this budget, those are positions that some of our current staff may actually apply for. And so in addition to attrition through possible retirements, there may be movement within there, and then we are prepared to absorb some of those costs through layoffs if necessary. We budget for unemployment every year, and we believe what we have budgeted will be appropriate this year.
And the furniture that you've got allocated for Lakes, the new furniture, you indicated that this is a result after a grant that was received to the schools from the GFFE.
Correct.
Do you foresee additional furniture coming? Is this something that's going to be phased in over a number of years throughout all the schools, or is this specifically geared for Lakes?
No, I think we'll continue to see requests for the varieties of furnitures. Specifically, we're rolling more of the optional furniture choices throughout Lakes, but the other principals are seeing the benefits as well, and so I do expect that we will see continued requests for variable types of furniture throughout all the elementaries in Baldwin as well. What we're seeing now is we're seeing a lot of creativity, and so we're seeing tables where our custodial and maintenance staff are extending the legs. We're seeing tables with adjustable legs, and we're taking the adjustable portion off so that you're seeing students who are sitting on the floor at very short tables on pillows. You're seeing some students who are working at standing height desks. We've got wobble chairs and stools and different types of seating options. So yes, I think you'll continue to see some equipment requests over the next few budgets as we offer more of those options.
Do you see a equal emphasis on the literacy coaches, the 2 literacy coaches you're proposing? For AMS, for Adams, and for the high school? Is one more prioritized than the other? Do you need them both?
We do need them both. I think that the
Right away?
So I think that, yes, I think that there's an opportunity in this budget to hire them both right away. The reduction in staff gives us an opportunity to hire both of these positions this year and still recognize a significant offsetting expense within the budget. If we were to only hire one this year and come back and request the second next year, we wouldn't necessarily be seeing that same number of offsetting reductions. And so I think there's an opportunity in this budget. Additionally, these are two coaches who are moving into the 7 through 12 certification area, which is a new area for us to be offering coaching in. So the opportunity to bring both in together affords us the opportunity to induct those two together and go through that induction one time rather than doing it twice consecutively. So it's got a built-in support partner. It allows us to bring them and onboard them one time, and it affords us the opportunity to do it in a year with the single largest offsetting staff reductions that we've presented in a budget in my time in district. So I think there's an opportunity combined with an instructional need. We've been slowly meeting this need over 10 years, so I can't pretend it's an urgent need, but I do think that there's an opportunity to bring the two on together, a number of opportunities.
Just to refresh the thing, there's so many pieces to these budgets. In terms of arts education and your commitment, ultimately, I think you're doing it now. You're adding some more residents, I don't know what you're calling them.
Artisan residents.
Artisan residents. We have hired artisan residents? We've provided funding for that?
Yeah, so yes, so there is money in the budget the present year that we're in, and we have put money in the budget again next year for an artisan residence, which is someone we contract with who comes into the school specifically, each of the elementary schools, for a week to provide an additional art experience with the kids. So it's not someone we're hiring, it's someone we're contracting for that period of time in each elementary.
And this is for all the elementary schools?
Yes.
Yes, and in fact, it's the contract is through the Guilford Arts Center, which we think is an opportunity to help introduce our school families to another Guilford resource that we have available. And so, in addition to getting that extra art experience, we hope that the parents who want to see that enriched art opportunity for their children can begin a relationship with the Guilford Arts Center as well. We may not be able to meet all of those desires through the school day, but there's other opportunities in Guilford to expose your students to all kinds of art experiences and opportunities.
Good.
I said experience and opportunity a lot in that answer.
Other than tuition line item, what other pressures is the board feeling? Where are the future pressures going to come from? Besides tuition and special ed, I mean, we know what those are, we see it all the time.
You know, I think, I don't know, pressures, perhaps this will speak to these coaching positions, right? I think, Mr. Gehrman, you asked about one or two, is one more important than the other. It is the single most commonly mentioned I want to say item, it's a human being, person, process, professional development tool that is mentioned to us every year when we meet with staff. The Board of Education meets once a year with staff from each of the schools, as well as a variety of subjects across the board. And we ask them every single time, because we've been making investment over a period of time. It is the single most the biggest return on investment, I think, one of the biggest returns on investment we have within the school system. It is providing teachers, it is providing veteran teachers, it is providing new teachers, it is the ability to learn more, to learn from each other, to learn new approaches, to really become better teachers. Rick Macenti, who has been serving our community for 13 years and is leaving us this year, said to us this year, I asked him what his priorities were. He said, don't take that coach out of that budget. Please make sure they don't take that coach out. He's been waiting for a literacy coach in that school for a long time. So I think it's something we're going to want to continue to keep an eye on. This embedded professional development is something that just has such a high return on investment, has continually been something that our staff has advocated for to us, and we see and we just see it really create outcomes for us in a positive way.
While we're on just talking about, how many, at what point for math and literacy coaches do we hit the full complement? Do we hit the full complement at some point where we've got a literacy coach everywhere, that we need one, and now you've got Adams, you got the high school, and what's after that for literacy, for either, any kind of professional development coach?
At this point, with this position in place, I would say that we've got literacy coaching in place K through 12, we would be done. We've got math coaching in place that is from K through 8. I think that the only places left for growth would be to continue to look at the high school, and where the high school becomes more discipline specific than the other schools, would there be place moving forward for a math coach would be the next place to go at the high school, and would there then ever be an additional position at the high school for a STEM coach, a coach who would work specifically in the science and technology areas? But I think that you're within a position or two of reaching the full complement of coaching, and that we would at that point be staffed up and there'd be no further growing. It's taken us 10 years to go from, we started with 3 coaches. Over the last 10 years, we've slowly and thoughtfully been growing that cohort out. We're within a position or two of having what I would consider a full coaching cohort. There are other districts that have larger contingencies than that. They're more specialized, or they work with smaller numbers of teachers, but I think that we're near complete.
Thank you.
Would it be appropriate, Mr. Chairman, to talk about the bonding issues while the Board of Ed is up here already?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, absolutely.
You want to talk?
Address bonding.
Address the bonding issues?
Sure. So again, there's only 2 projects on the bonding list, the bonding request that we have going forward. One is essentially the completion. It's phase 2 of the heating, ventilation, and cooling project at Baldwin. We're well into this project, but it needs to be brought to completion. And then the next one is a similar heating, ventilation, and cooling project at Lakes with the addition of doors and windows. And that is a system that, quite honestly, failed about a year ago. You've seen the requests coming through for the repairs. We're working to keep a system that is beyond its useful life up and running. It's the original equipment. By replacing it, we will relieve ourselves of the maintenance costs that we've been absorbing for the last year and a half. The windows and doors will allow us to increase the efficiency of the building and the security of the building. We've always tried to pair the window and door projects to the environmental systems projects. So, quite honestly, they're both what I would call needed at this time. And we've mentioned the field piece. We do believe that we're stretching that stadium field and track, but we believe we have another year of safe use in that, and then we will collaborate with the town and Parks and Rec and hope to have that bonding request in front of you this time next year, so that we are going into the last year of use of that carpet on that field as well as that track.
I want to thank you for clarifying that, because when I said before there was a comment in one of those emails about the health and safety, I didn't want there to be a thought that it was not safe.
It's been inspected.
There's concern about it getting older.
Yes.
And getting there, but it was not I just want to make sure that that was heard very clearly.
The
So
field's
thank you for
inspected
that.
regularly. We make sure, and if we had
Yes.
any concern on either side that the field was unsafe, we would shut it down, and we would be fortunate to have the backup of the second turf field should that become necessary. But right now, we believe that we will get another year's use out of it, and we would never push it beyond safety limits, although we are getting some borrowed time out of it at this point.
And we have shut down a field before.
We
A
have
big
had to shut
question.
down fields before.
Baldwin, we're in phase 2. Lakes were in phase 1. This is all new.
It's yep, and Lakes is
Why
small
was-
enough that it's a complete project.
Why wasn't Lakes anticipated within the original HVAC project.
It was. This replacement of lakes was in our 10-year project. About 10 or 11 years ago, we completed a full facility needs. 2008, 2009, well, not 2008, 2009, 3 or 4 years ago, when we had a budget that did not pass at the first referendum, we made some adjustments and we gambled on some projects and pushed them back so that we would get that budget and then the following year's budget passed, and did not want to come forward with an overly large bonding request when we were trying to bounce back from having failed a referendum. So we took a risk. We pushed some of the projects later than Mr. Gurnham felt confident with. We got the years out of them, but it was a miss. We should have replaced lakes 2 years ago, and we would have avoided some of those maintenance fees.
So this basically 1.9, almost $2 million, that should satisfy our needs at lakes.
Yes, it'll be a new
I will
system.
never use the word forever, but it will
No, no, no.
satisfy
No, but I'd
our needs
anticipate that
going
we'd get
forward.
20 years out of that system, yes.
Okay.
And we've already spent, I mean, what was it, 150,000?
Yeah, we did, yeah, this money
Yes.
was,
Yeah, no, we've had some emergency repairs this year.
And again, those emergency repairs had to be absorbed by a budget, so
Yes.
that meant something
Yes.
else got
Yes.
not done.
That's exactly right. That site improvement and maintenance budget ended up floating that system for 2 years. And that means that there were carpet tiles, ceiling tiles, or plumbing repairs or upgrades those were then pushed off while we kept that system afloat. Again, our buildings are in good shape. We have done a good job keeping up, but a 10-year facilities plan is the best plan that we can lay out. We make adjustments along the way, and sometimes we hit things exactly right, and sometimes we're off by a year or two.
Yes, go ahead.
Speaking of projecting out, and of course, we should only be talking about this budget, but enrollment is an issue. And of course, Guilford's a relative oasis, surrounded by these people losing so many students. And of course, we had one study that didn't quite pan out done 10 years ago. And, you know, you know where we stand for 2021, but what are we doing about looking a few years past that down the road?
We're looking at commissioning a second demographic study moving forward. We do think it's time that we bring somebody in and that we conduct a follow-on survey. Unfortunately, we cannot work with the demographer who completed this survey. He has passed on, so we're looking at other organizations that do similar work. We're looking at commissioning a new study.
And I would like to mention, so as we've all seen, right, that this last study was off. We have not lost the number of students that were expected. The study before that was almost spot on.
It was dead on.
I mean, it was
Same
off by
demographer.
like 40 students or something
Right.
over a 10-year period. It was really so that these can be really, as your question is suggesting, really useful studies. We had kind of an anomaly in this last few years.
Well, I don't know that it was an anomaly as much as it was the work of the board putting forth programs like all-day kindergarten,
No,
the
and I think
baccalaureate
that's exactly
program,
right.
and the investments into the
No,
school
I think
system,
that's
which
I think that's right. I think that's right. And we've been, you know, as I mentioned on Tuesday, and have mentioned to this board in the past, we've been very lucky. There are neighboring districts, particularly some of our smaller neighboring districts, who are looking at their high school program and really concerned about what they can offer their students in the coming years because of the impact of those enrollment decreases. So the fact that we have not seen those is thank you. I do think a credit to what we have to offer, but also in a cyclical fashion allows us to continue to offer the strength of that program.
I just think it's important to remind anybody who's looking at us tonight that this is the first time that there was a net reduction in staff because of the cancellation of a unit at Adams. We don't anticipate a knock-on like that. We don't anticipate anything like that happening anytime soon again, I think.
No, and to be totally fair, over the last several budget cycles, we have shifted staff. So as we have seen declining enrollment, we've taken core classroom positions, and we've used them to build out ancillary programs like the coaching supports, like the special education capacity that we have built, and like increases in school counselor and social worker and psychologist supports without significantly increasing the budget because we've been able to adjust those needs. We've been making those reductions at the elementary schools fairly slowly and in small number because at an elementary school, structurally, it's easy to make one classroom adjustment. At the high school, it's easy to make adjustments structurally because of the way that the course study works and students select courses. Middle schools, having a different structure, tend to be more resistant, and you end up having to wait until you reach capacity and you can make one significant change. Either the reduction of a full team that supports between 80 and 100 students, or in this case, the reduction in the English language arts piece. So yes, it's the single biggest reduction that we've seen, and even though we repurposed 4 of those positions, we still show a net reduction of staff of 6 FTEs in this budget. That's exactly right. We don't anticipate something of that magnitude next year, no.
Thank you.
Which is why with the decrease in staff at Adams in particular, it's, when you were speaking about the uniqueness of the opportunity to add the learning coaches, or the teaching coaches, at the high school and at the middle school level, you don't know when you're gonna get this similar opportunity down the road to reduce the number of staff at the middle school or any other school for that
That's
matter,
exactly right.
to accommodate that increase.
And with coaches being relatively, positions that fall relatively high on the salary scale, it affords a particular opportunity to bring in 2 of those positions in this budget. That's exactly right.
It just occurred to me, are the coaches part of the teachers union? Or are
Yes.
they, okay.
Yep. You can think of them as master teachers. Yep.
Okay.
They are in the teacher's contract. They are teachers. They have no supervisory, administrative, or managerial responsibilities, but they're experienced master teachers who also have the ability to work with adult learners effectively as well as with young learners.
But the
Yep.
coaching positions are open to teaching staff members.
Yes, we have filled coaching positions in the district on 2 or 3 occasions with our own master teachers who we have seen grow through the Guilford system and then take on those coaching responsibilities.
Are you
Yes.
going to be doing it this year? This coming year?
We have posted those positions. We've posted those anticipated positions. We won't fill them until the actual budget is approved at referendum, but we will see. They're open to teachers. But they're not, teachers who may necessarily, it's not a bumping situation. We're not going to move somebody in, but we've seen talented teachers from Guilford win those positions before. And in fact, Dr. Anine Crystal, who is now our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, was a coach in this district for 9 years before she moved into that Assistant Superintendent. Teacher contract, you can think of them as teachers of teachers, master teachers.
Okay.
Any further questions? Trying to see if I have any. I don't think I do. I do not.
Thank you all again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've grilled the town and the Board of Education.
Mild grilling.
Yes. So I've already done the recap. I think last year I did another recap, but I did it earlier. So we know where we stand. And we're on to the discussion and deliberation of where we stand with these budgets. And I'll open up the floor for discussion. Ken, did you?
Well, I think it should be said before we even propose anything that there was really great work done by the 2 boards in fashioning these budgets. These are reasonable budgets. These show a lot of restraint going in, and nobody knows that better than this board, which had the privilege, and I think it may be unique among other other towns, of being invited into the participation, into the development. We started with education back, well, the first formal meetings were in December, and then in January we were invited, and we love to go to the town ones. And we've been to the town workshops. which were very illuminating, and we've seen the restraint that goes in, and without, I'm sure that Matt Hoey has this on the tip of his tongue, what the various departments asked for going in and what they wound up accepting going out. And so these numbers, which are reasonable, you know, I don't want to repeat them ad nauseum, but the town's operating budget going in at 3.4, the schools at 2.03. These represent restraint and a good effort. I would like us to consider the opportunity to allow the town to benefit by these reductions. And I'd like to propose that we reduce the budget by $100,000. Not discriminating between the two operating budgets, but saying a total of $100,000 that would represent a gesture on behalf of the community in this particular time to share in the restraint and to see that we are watching out for them. And I would like to see us provide some relief and support for the taxpayer. And I would suggest that we not go beyond that number, but we go to $100,000 together, an aggregate number, to see where we could be in terms of providing that relief. This is, hopefully this would not mean, and there's a phrase one of my colleagues uses here, kicking the can down the road, meaning you're not absorbing everything that you wanted to do, but finding some movement within these existing budgets. I know that last year, as Matt wanted to point out to me personally, being my 28th year in going through this, it's not quite as much as Mr. Hoey, who still has a one-year advantage on that process. But last year, we requested a reduction of $200,000 from the budgets together. The year before, it was $500,000. And this would be an opportunity for us to show a specific gesture to the community that we are mindful of cost of living, we're mindful to the difficulties that we're all having, and we're going to be reducing that. And I think the effect of that would be appreciated by the town.
Thank you, Ken. Others?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This was never going to be the year that we could show no increase in the mill rate, but it is a very modest one. And at 155, it's under the rate of inflation, so, you know, it's a job well done. I agree with Mr. Gammerman's remarks in every way about the restraint shown and the organization and the detail afforded to all of us. So thank you to both boards, please. The increases in both budgets, you know, we all need to be reminded are mainly due to contracted salaries. There's not a lot we can do about that. There is, of course, this is the top year for debt service for the high school, and there's not a lot we can do about that either. At least, of course, that debt was borrowed at very low rates, so we're not suffering really. There weren't any unreasonable requests from any town department. I think, you know, we have a very cooperative group of town of department heads, and I think the budget reflects the changes in our demographics and the changes we're seeing in the schools. So it serves the town well. There's just one point I'd like to make, and it's kind of a reversal. A career in debt capital markets has shown me the good ways and the bad ways to use debt borrowing, and it should be used when it's the most effective way forward, not the most convenient. So some towns around us, Mary Jane can tell you, have no debt, or practically none. They may be missing something, you know, they may not be having it right, but it's something, it can be done. The town recently agreed to refinance some bonds. It's a good idea, and we're going to show some results out of that. Our debt service, even as projected here on one of the favorite charts, will drop $1 million a year over the next 5 years. Much of that actually will come from town projects, not just the high school. It doesn't necessarily mean we want all that headroom back, as somebody pointed out today in an email. I agree with that. But here we are. Circumstances have changed. Interest rates have slammed down. And although the board knows I always encourage them to increase capital spending and save to spend, I think right now if we reduced the increase of capital spending of $150,000 and turned back to bonding at rates now that are half of inflation, I think it would serve our taxpayers well. It's a rare thing to do. It's a great circumstance. I think we should take advantage. I could go on, but I think that's about it.
Great. Bob, thank you.
Thank you.
Others?
Want me to go next?
If you'd like to.
All right. So probably just kind of address the comments to the taxpayers and those kind of viewing these workshops that we have. I don't really expect a lot of consensus of the board, in my opinions. I didn't ask as many detailed questions about the budget this year because I kind of have a more holistic approach about the budget, and I'm trying to kind of think of the big picture of the budget. And this is going to sound like a rerun if you've been kind of watching these workshops year after year, but I keep using this story about the frog who he's in the boiling water. They put him in the pot when the water's warm. They turn the heat on. The water starts to boil. It only goes up a little. Frog just doesn't realize it. He thinks, oh, it just went up a little. It just went up a little. Before you know it, our poor frog is boiling in the water. And I use this as kind of an analogy for how the taxes and the spending have increased in Guilford. Over many years, perhaps a decade and a half, we kind of have these 3 to 4% increases, and they've been a little bit more restrained, 2 to 3%. And these increases on their own, like the small increase in the water for the frog, are really not enough to make you turn your head. I don't find them to be unconscionable. I don't find them to be extraordinary or excessive. But the problem is that they just keep occurring year after year, and it has this compounding effect. And these increases do outpace inflation, and in many years they're outpacing real wage growth. So you're probably feeling it if your real wages aren't growing as much as 3% a year. And while I don't find a 3.4% increase from the town to be terribly excessive, and especially not a 2% increase from the Board of Education, I have made quite a few comments and been very consistent in my opinions about our debt. Guilford took on the biggest historical capital purchase it ever has in the high school. It was a great decision, but during the years where that debt servicing was climbing, I think we only added fuel to the fire by not restraining the pace of other capital spending. And I've made that clear year after year, and have tried to vote no to some of the larger requests for capital. This particular cycle, like the frog in the boiling water, has led Guilford to mill rates that are now north of 30. And I think that maybe it's psychological, but I feel as a taxpayer, as a property owner, that mill rates that are above 30 start to reflect a tipping point. And this tipping point is kind of when you start asking yourself, are these spending increases and these tax increases really beneficial to Guilford? Are they beneficial to the residents? Are they beneficial to the property owners? And starting to question whether the increases really do add value to Guilford. So maybe turn it around into an opportunity. Maybe there's hope for the frog. And unfortunately, the frog is kind of the poor taxpayer. But this year, we've gotten an increase in the grand list, and we have an increase in revenue, I think roughly about 1.4 million. So it's covering about close to half of the new spending increase this year. And what I would say is, let me propose a motion, Mr. Chairman, that the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen take on the challenge of reducing the budget by $1.5 million. This would eliminate the need for a mill rate increase this year. Thanks.
Thank you. So there is a motion on the table. Do I hear a second on the motion for discussion purposes?
I'll second.
All right, Jeff, we have a second? Discussion. I would say to that something to the effect of, I appreciate your challenge, but that is a pretty catastrophic reduction. to
Well,
get
just
there.
a few years back, the
But-
budget got sent back and we reduced it by similar amounts.
That was the case. And
Not
that was also,
impossible.
that was, no, it's not impossible, but that was also the case when in that particular year, we had some challenges. I'm looking to see what year that was with the referendum that it went down. That was in 2016. And we ended up, I don't exactly remember where we were and where we started that budget deliberation after those referendums, but I believe we ended up at 1.52. We're going to be awfully close to that right now. I wanted to address another issue, or another comment that you made, and it's appreciated on the mill rate and being north of 30. I can't speak with the crystal ball in the future, but I'm looking at the mill rate history that we've had, and we've had 30s before. This is not the first time or first few years we've been in the 30s. I think it's fair to say that people don't remember back in 1991 to 1996, we had 30, 31, 32, 35.17, and then we had a reval which knocked it back down to 28. Then we were another 5-year period from 30.23 to 32.47, and from 2003 to 2018 we were under 30. We went, and in fact there was two periods that we were actually under 20. There was 1 year we were under 20. So yes, the mill rate has grown, and that is due to numerous reasons. Some of them are reval, and I do believe that growth and that mill rate growth that we've seen of those increases has certainly slowed down over the past few years. And it should go without saying that the grand list has been a factor the last 2 years and has been in our favor. The other point I would make is that regarding the increase this particular year, you do, I know, and historically, and I appreciate also the fact that inflation rate and cost of living increase, and right now where we stand, especially with the revised at 1.57, which is below the 1.6 of the cost of living increase, we are now below both of those. And that was something I know you were not able to make the meeting the other night, but it was something that I brought up, is that there was a sheet that I passed out, and Jonathan, I didn't get a chance to tell you, everybody got the same sheet. It was about the referendum history. And there's a chart in there that says eventual inflation and cost of living. And this year would be the first year we're under both of those rates since 2002, not including reval years. That's a little bit of cheating. You can't say that those count.
But it's also interesting to note that our spending increased by quite a bit more than that. It was just mitigated by the increase in revenue.
And there are certain value-add items, I think, that both boards have put into this budget, into their budgets, understanding that, I think, and I've said this to a couple of my colleagues, that if this was a flat grand list and no growth, we'd be having a much different conversation. And I believe that the Board of Selectmen may have also had a very similar conversation, saying, hey, the grand list came in really healthy. Maybe we should look at a couple of things that we haven't had before that we should put back in. Because this is, hey, let's take advantage of the fact that we have growth. It's not going to happen every year. We got fortunate this year. Next year, all bets are off the table. And one of my comments was going to be that if, in fact, everything that we were presented tonight, the budget on the Board of Ed operating and the town with no debt service, with the grandless growth, we would be at 0.6 on a mill rate increase. And just to go back to your initial motion to cut the budgets, that would be $1 million out of the Board of Education. If you go 2/3, 1/3, it doesn't have to be, we could decide that, but if you go $1 million and $500,000 out of the town, I don't even want to fathom to know what's going to get cut and how this is going to affect the taxpayers and the children and the community. That's just my opinion for discussion purposes. Anybody?
So the last time around when we did that, I mean, we muddled through.
Yeah, but I
Not,
don't
But there
know,
was still an
not,
increase
not,
in the mill
not,
rate.
not 1.5.
but I don't know that that
Not
was,
even-
Didn't mean whether the mill rate went up or not, it just meant last time there was a referendum, we sent the budget back and we reduced the budget by similar amounts.
but I don't know if that was the
was
most responsible thing to do, right? I mean, we had to do
Do you think
it.
the children really suffered? Just
I can,
a year of outrageous suffering, or?
$1.5 million
it depends on what
is a
your
lot of
definition of
suffering.
suffering is,
I'm
Jonathan.
not sure what yours is.
I
But
mean, I
that's,
think,
I don't think that's what our role here is, to determine how badly we can
Yeah.
determine how people are suffering.
yeah.
Well, I'm just pointing out that maybe you can reduce a budget without that much suffering. by
Yeah, but
funding.
there's also a reason that people live in
For
Guilford.
matter of fact, the taxpayer might consider it to
Yeah.
be relief.
I guess if I could say something,
Go ahead,
Mr.
Megan,
Chairman.
Megan, go
I
ahead.
think there's a reason that people live in Guilford and they've come to expect a certain level of education, as evidenced by people moving into the school district. They've also come to expect a certain level of services, right? Like, we have a great police department, we have a great fire department, not every town has that. So I think there are some things that we have a responsibility at this point to maintain and upkeep. I don't think you can give the townspeople, the taxpayer, certain services and then take them away. I think that's irresponsible. So I would not be in favor of the $1.5 million challenge. I just think it's irresponsible for generations of taxpayers moving forward.
Not to mention our seniors and our senior tax freeze.
Which is why I asked my Safer Grant question, because I don't believe you can add services and then take them away. I hope we keep those firefighters moving forward. So, and I think that's the same for education. You can't give coaches, or you can't give certain services and then expect to say, actually, we don't need these, and the next class or the next generation doesn't get to benefit from that.
You know, I kind of put forward, though, I wonder when we did make those kind of reductions in that tax year, if any taxpayers actually felt any difference in services. I don't know, you have to kind of decide how you felt, you know, as you went about your daily life.
Well, I think that speaks to the tuition line, right? Like, there's some families that certainly felt that and felt like they had to go outside of our special education services, and then we had to build that back up over time, correct? I mean, we built it up and we were able to bring students back into the system, and I think that's the same for other services as well.
My expectation is that if the town and the Board of Education were faced with a challenge to reduce their budgets by $100 million, let's just say, for the Board of Ed, and $500,000 for the Board of Selectmen, the first place they'd look to make those reductions would be in capital, and then in maintaining the facilities. And if we're going to defer those costs, and at the same time, several, you in particular, have had an aversion to bonding to repair our existing systems, then if we're going to take money away to replace things as they break down, and we're going to take money away to maintain the things that we have, and we're not going to bond, then the systems start to break down. And either you're going to put money into the budget to maintain what we have, or to set aside money to pay for things instead of bonding, or you're not. And then you're going to bond for it, which means that we're going to pay more because we're paying interest on top of what we borrowed to replace the things that we didn't maintain when we could have in the first spot. And I think that it's short-sighted to say, well, let's just reduce $1.5 million and then throw it in the laps of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, and they're gonna look and say, well, I guess we're not gonna put aside money to buy this equipment, we'll just put it in a bonding initiative. Or we're not gonna make these repairs at the schools that need it, we'll see if we can get through for another year. And then, as we've seen over the last year and a half with the HVAC repair bills that we were getting at Baldwin and at Guilford Lakes, we're spending more and more money, which means that there's less money for for supplies and materials to use in the classroom because, or we reduce, or the Board of Education reduces the tuition line and says, and then there's a freeze put on throughout the school district on supplies and materials.
So the question becomes, what did that $1.5 million cut cost us now in additional maintenance? I wasn't part of the process then. I don't know exactly what was taken out. 86% of the budget increases, 86% of the budget are employees. They're contracted salaries. And we can't just run around firing people just for.
I can't imagine the catch-up we would have to do after that.
So, that's right.
Because it's no different than unassigned fund balance.
You
There's
earlier.
well, let's take
Disruption.
unassigned fund
The
balance
HVAC
and help out the taxpayers.
It
And you
cost
do that,
us
and you gotta find that money again next year. We're gonna have to find a lot of we're gonna have to find this money again.
So
Down
when
the-
we did
down-
that years ago, do you feel like we had to have some kind of catch-up? We had some
We've been
extraordinary...
catching up on
from the
numerous
HVAC
items over the
system
last
at
5 to
Lakes.
6 years. And so, yes.
It's a late catch-up.
And there's been a gap in your involvement on the board. And yes, there were some difficulties in that, in trying to get that back. I'm sorry, I saw the first selectman's hand up.
Yes, I can't sit here without making a comment. I find that challenge disingenuous, particularly since you didn't ask a single question of either of us, either the Board of Education or the Board of Selectmen, about items that you were concerned about or thought could be perhaps massaged, worked, reworked, eliminated. So I would ask you to suggest to the Board of Selectmen and to the Board of Education where you would like those kind of cuts to come from.
Across the board, 1.5%, every single item.
Except salaries and benefits.
Yeah, you can't.
Can't do
touch
that.
You can't do that across the board. 80% of the budget is fixed on people.
So you're
They're
cutting,
people resources.
That's
So
what
we're
trying to
cutting
do across the
staff,
board.
if that's what you're suggesting.
So that leaves you with 15% left over to cut, and at 1.5% of that, you're talking about a 7-odd percent cut to the rest of the budget. And it just doesn't go there from here, I don't think.
I'm going to entertain.
I'd like to
One-
call the question.
What, well, Ken just tapped me, and then I was going to say I'm going to entertain one more comment on the discussion. Only because he tapped me.
Okay. I didn't realize a tap could be so significant.
Well, sit next to me, so.
I mentioned earlier in my presentation that we started this process in November and December. And we've had possibly 3 or 4 Board of Finance meetings since then. We've had so much interaction since then. I think with putting $1.5 million cut on the table now, without any even inquiry going forward, it kind of mutilates the process. This was not the process that we have developed, which is an interchange among the boards. We've been at this thing for a long time, and we've had enough opportunity to really go at the budgets in detail. And the fact that we have not indicates a certain support to both the town and the schools. Not 100% support, but a basic support that we endorse their mission. And to suddenly, at the 11th hour, to raise a question about the entire mission is stunning. That's my comment.
Okay. I'm not going to accept any further comments on this. I'm going to call the question. Again, the motion on the table is a reduction of $1.5 million cumulatively to both boards. All in favor? Signify by saying aye. All those opposed?
No.
I don't think there's any abstentions on that, so. Okay,
I appreciate the conversation, though. Thank you.
and I appreciate you having the conversation with us. Okay, so who's next? I'm looking back and forth here.
I said it last year, I wish I had a crystal ball. I think these budgets are responsible. I commend both the boards on what they put forth. I have concerns about the interest income. The markets are so volatile. I hope that that's an appropriate number, but none of us really know. I think it's a return on investment, and I think there's a quality of life that people live in Guilford for. I've seen it over and over and over again in comments, whether it's the senior programs, the Meals on Wheels, the senior tax freeze, the programs by Park and Rec, the concerts on the green, the library, my goodness, the library. I worry. I mean, I would support $100,000 cut, but I have to say that I am concerned about even cutting that. I think what's been brought forth here is a very good faith effort to address the needs of our entire community, both from the littlest children to our seniors. I think I would suggest, $75,000 from the town, or the Board of Ed, and 25 from the town. It would be my suggestion if we're gonna cut 100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Veronica.
I mean, Veronica, well, you already heard my diatribe before, so I obviously agree with everything that Veronica just said about the town and the quality of life and the standards that people want to see in this town. I, like Veronica, I don't really feel like there's a lot to cut here. 100,000 seems reasonable. I like what Ken had said about, a good faith effort to the taxpayers, but I do think these budgets are really responsible. I don't think that the taxpayers should feel like there's anything in here that's not truly necessary and truly needed, especially for the growth and the development of both the services that we provide and the education that we provide. And I think that's been really clear in all the presentations. So I would support the 100,000 moving forward, but I think I would just stress that even that is, to me, significant, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
If I could go,
Jeff?
Jeff? So I want to commend both the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen for the budgets they presented. I think on the Board of Ed side, they've responded in a creative and opportune way to the declining enrollment by reducing the staff at Adams Middle School and using that reduction as a way to increase the coaching staff. It's good to see that the tuition will be fully funded, as that will hopefully mean fewer freezes on supplies and classroom materials and site improvements. I think the bonding requests address overdue repairs and replacements needed at Baldwin and Lakes, and so I'm supportive of those, that request. On the town side, I think restoring the capital line item to pay for more items as we purchase them rather than through bonding makes good fiscal sense in the short term and the long term. I think it bears repeating that this is the last year of the increasing debt service associated with the new high school, and that increase in the debt service is a substantial component in the increase in the expenditures. The net increase of the half-time full, or the 0.5 full-time employees on the town side to provide an additional receptionist at the Park and Rec, and an additional staff person for Public Works. Serves a number of needs that the town faces here at the community center and also on our streets. Another expenditure driver is the reduction in the SAFER grant. Funding the additional firefighters has allowed the staff or the North Guilford Fire Department to be fully staffed, and that's provided better response times for our residents in North Guilford, which is, in certain circumstances, literally life-saving. We're projecting increased non-tax revenue and an increase in the grand list. The growth of the grand list, in my opinion, is due to the new construction in the town of both commercial and residential spaces. And I think the importance of the continued growth of the grand list can't be overlooked. When we add new structures and improve old structures, the town is able to partially offset stagnant or declining real estate values that many homeowners have experienced over the last 10 years. The fact that the grand list has grown has played an important part in reducing the increase that the town's mill rate and our taxpayers will face. And for all those reasons, I believe the budgets as presented should be, that the boards should be commended for the budgets, and I support the reduction of the $100,000 along the lines that was mentioned by Veronica with the 75-25 split. I think that both boards have provided funds for services that our citizens can expect, while at the same time being responsible for the planning of the future needs of the town, and trying to minimize the increases that taxpayers will face down the road.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, can I add something?
Veronica, you may.
Throughout the year, as we had our Board of Finance meetings and then through the workshops and things like that, I've tried to keep a tally of every time I heard a department head or the superintendent or the first selectman talk about an efficiency that we've tried to bring to the town. So I compiled a list, and I unfortunately forgot to read it earlier, but some of the things that our town departments have been really good at doing to mitigate their budgets and to save money for the town are things like the library and their statewide loan system, digital books, seeking out grants, a regional hazmat team, mutual aid. Our assistant fire chief implemented, and I don't even know how to Viochi, say the name of the software, the Viochi workflow system.
Connecticut company, too.
And on his own, it worked with other town departments, not just the fire department, but to help workflow and bring efficiencies to our town employees, all through technology. I mean, these are all things that bring forth, save time, and is worth, mentioning to the taxpayer. Our police department uses a regionalized recruitment system through the South Central Criminal Justice Technical Crimes Investigations Group, SWAT, State Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. The Registrar of Voters, people have no idea, but we have 2 referendums coming up, one for the presidential primary and one for exactly what we're talking about tonight. What they don't realize is that our voter machines, the digital machines, have to be kept after an election for a specific period of time. Well, those 2 elections cross over each other. So now we're down and we don't have machines that we can use for our voting system. Our registrar got on the phone, called all over the state of Connecticut looking for extra machines to save the taxpayers and the town of Guilford money from having to rent them or buy new ones. So that kind of work goes on. The Board of Ed, Guilford Arts Center, Artistry and Residency, you heard about that tonight. The other night we heard about a collaborative approach with Madison with special ed services and transportation. They address the declining enrollment in their schools. All these things are appropriate management tools that are being implemented in town with the taxpayer in mind. Medical benefits being reduced to the year 14 and 15 levels.
that's why I'm comfortable in saying there's not much here that you can criticize or cut or without hurting somebody. It's a responsible budget, and I'm happy to support it, and I believe that's why I was elected for these decisions. I think that's why people elected me to make these decisions, and I'm very comfortable in supporting these two budgets. Thank you.
You did your homework. Wow. That was quite the list. Thank you, Veronica.
There's one other point that should be
Ken, yes,
made.
go ahead.
And that is I think it's implicit in what Veronica said, and that's the degree of volunteerism that we have in this town. There is support for the schools and the town that go way beyond the literal application of dollars.
Yep.
And I know this personally. I know it personally, how much time is involved in the volunteer effort in this town, and it is substantial. You can pick it, whether it's Park and Rec, whether it's library, whether it's the athletic programs that spill over from the very young to the very old. There is a degree of volunteerism where people are out there raising money and raising awareness, and we've seen that even in the furniture.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes from the furniture on to, it extends out to every other way we can check it. And that volunteerism helps make Guilford the kind of community it is.
Thank you, Ken. All right, I'm going to try not to be repetitive. And I've crossed out a bunch of things I've already either brought up or have been brought up. So, as we all know, this is a culmination of several months that we've been involved with this process. And you've already mentioned volunteerism and the number of people that have been part of this. I mentioned it last 2 nights ago. I actually got a call from a reporter, which I thought that reporter would be here tonight, so now I'm going to have to probably get a call from him tomorrow, asking if there were any surprises in these budgets. And I was honest. I said no. Not like the last 2 years. Last year, or 2 years ago, we had a revaluation and a grand list decrease, which was, as shown on our sheets, it was a compounded issue. Last year, we had the governor's budget, which had caused fits in terms of uncertainty on ECS funding and teacher pension contributions. This year was pretty straightforward. I think the budgets were right about where we thought they were going to be from both the town and the Board of Education. There was no surprise at all in the debt service. We knew exactly where that was many years ago. And, with the exception, if the Board of Ed decided not to go forward with a little bit more of an increase in that tuition, you'd be back under 2 again, 2% increase, which would have been 4 years in a row. And as far as the Board of Selectmen, the operating budget being 2.9, not including the capital. And to go to, Bob, to your point, which I really appreciated in terms of the rates right now, bonding versus the capital. I know that the town has worked very hard getting that capital number back up, and I know exactly why you're saying it. It makes a lot of sense to say
I'm
that.
pro-capital,
Yeah.
save to spend, but in this instance.
It's an instance that just came upon us.
Right.
At least even more so in the last
Indeed.
few days. But to get that number back over $1 million, I think is going exactly the direction we want to go that we had been in, where we decimated it many, many years ago. But I do appreciate that thought. I look at where we were 6 years ago when the high school kicked in, and in my mind, we've weathered the storm. I know there have been increases. I don't think there's any surprise that there have been increases, but I just looked, quick, and I did some, over the last 6 years, our average budget increase has been 2.8%. And our average mill rate increase, not including the reval year, so that's 5 years worth, was 2.19%. And that's with some pretty hefty debt service on the high school. I really think that a lot of this community that were naysayers about that did not ever think that was going to happen. at least not to that level. The only last thing I'll say is I think that any reductions in this is a risk reward. No matter what you cut, it's going to be a chance. I think that they were so incredibly crafted. I wouldn't even, I wasn't originally entertaining any kind of a decrease. But knowing where we are right now, with some additional grand list increase, being now under 1.6%, being at 1.57, we could actually come in at under 1.5 with a very minimal cut. To go to what Ken said and what I've heard from a couple of my colleagues here is a good faith effort. A good faith effort of $100,000 combined is really just saying, listen, we're paying attention. We're going to get it to a number, whether it's optics or whatever. You know, whether it's 1.6, 1.5, 1.7, there's not a huge difference. But as someone recently said to me, that's the cost of maybe somebody's family dinner out. And that is probably very important for some. So I have no issue with the $100,000 reduction combined. I'm a little bit more towards splitting that 50-50. I mean, we could go 66, 66666, 3333 and do a 2/3, 1/3. I'm a little bit more weighed, I think, towards some of the town being able. There's a couple of things that could be, I think, reduced that are not going to have a big effect at all. On the Board of Education side, I'm not so sure, but I think the 75-25. I can go either way on this. I still think that either reduction, whether it's a $25,000 swing one way or the other, is not something that's not possible. But above and beyond that, I think now we're starting to get into things where there are community members that came out that wanted certain things and are expecting certain things that will not get done with that. And I know it's a minimal amount, but I do think it's a good faith effort, and Ken stated it very, very well at the beginning. So with that being said, I would like to propose a motion on the, now I got to do figures though, on 100,000 cumulative, as far as the split, how we split that. I've heard 75-25, Board of Ed, town. I'm more in the 50-50. I don't know if that's where we stand on that. I've heard more 75-25 than I've heard 50-50.
You could go 50-50, that's fine with me.
It's
That,
64. It's a de minimis. It doesn't-
I know.
It doesn't,
It is. But there's not a lot of room in either one. But I think just out of fairness, even the I know we go 2/3, 1/3. I think going more on the town is, I think that's not the way to go, majority, but.
Pray for less snow next year.
That's right. I know I have Mary Jane in the audience doing the 1.46. What are the, I mean, I could go on here and do the math, but on the town budget, if we did a 50-50, I mean, it's just basically taking 50 off of this. Okay. Nothing like an Excel spreadsheet.
What'd she do, 50-50?
Right now, that's where it stands. Okay. So if you all. Right. Yeah, at this point, I'm not looking at percentages, I'm just looking at the flat numbers. So, so what I will do is I will put in the form of motion to approve a town budget for fiscal year 2021 of $31,519,607, which includes a reduction of $50,000 from the original proposed budget, and an education budget for fiscal year 2021 of $61,728,459, which includes a reduction of $50,000 from the original proposed budget, and a debt service budget of $10,495,185, which is not reduced and stands as is, for a total combined budget of $103,743,251. That's in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
Any further comments? Call the question, all in favor?
Well, to make one
Aye.
comment, I'll just say that obviously I feel like it doesn't go far enough for taxpayers, but I've never met a decrease in taxes that I didn't like, so.
Okay. So, I just called the question and aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, everyone. You thought you were done, you're not. I believe we have to approve the revenue budget, right?
The bond?
The revenue, revenue budget, and
Oh,
then,
the bond, yeah.
I think just the bonding, huh?
Just the bond, I think.
oh, just the bond? Oh, okay.
I
'cause-
think we're gonna leave the revenue alone.
Yeah, no,
and
last
then-
year, we did vote on the revenue, but
We
we
did the
did because we
interest,
did,
yeah.
we made a
Yeah.
change
Yeah, we
to
made
it,
the
so,
change.
all right, so that's staying as is.
But we're not making a change.
Yes?
Bonding question, it will be rounded up to the nearest thousand.
Okay.
Why is that?
So it would be 2616?
With bond, also does it.
Yeah, that's $40. So. And this is, this motion is to approve the bond request that's going to go to bond counsel
Okay.
for crafting. So do I hear a motion to approve the bond request of the Board of Education for the Phase 2 HVAC project at Baldwin, HVAC and window door upgrades at Lakes, and architectural engineering services for future projects totaling $2,616.
You want to round that or?
$2,616,000.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. I think we got everything, right? As usual, I want to thank the board for their discussion. This has been a long process. Now we get to send it off to town meeting on April 7th, budget referendum on April 21st. Both of those are on Tuesdays. Town meeting, just for purposes, at 7:30 in this room on April 7th, again Tuesday, and then the budget referendum will be, polls will be open at all 5 polling places, 6 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening on Tuesday, April 21st. Is there any other comments from the Board of Finance? Last item on the agenda is public forum. Anybody wishing to address the board in public forum? Okay, with that, I believe we're all set for this evening. Thank you very much to everyone who was part of these budgets across the board. And at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
You know, I thought this year you guys were gonna support it.